Hunting our bus, The Journey Onward by Master Atlan, Chapter 29, Behind the Scenes. Osmond took a moment and just stared silently at the greatest mistake he had ever made. Could he actually make that claim so easily? He was sure if he put some thought into it, he could remember a worse crime or failure or mistake he had committed that cost him even more shame or regret. That was the biggest problem with having such a long list of grievances and misjudgments. He couldn't decide which one haunted him more. Although it was certain that this was the biggest one in recent memory, he had taken up a duty, a solemn vow and job to protect them from the world when they needed it most. And here he was, admiring his lack of action and failure to protect. Would she hate him? If she was still awake and could speak right now, would she curse them? How he wouldn't blame her if she did. He'd even expect her to, but she couldn't, and it's more than likely that she would never get another chance to do it again. Because of their fate, her days were numbered, and all they could do was make her suffering easy and make the last few days comfortable. This was fear, the same kind of unbridled fear children had when facing the dark, or adults had at the thought they were alone. This overwhelming, choking sense of uncertainty that had all of them. The people chose to keep a cool and collected head, running around in panic, because now they were facing the impossible. Except it couldn't even be called that anymore, because it happened. This was just uncharted territory, and if it happened to one of them, then there was the threat that it could happen to any one of them now too, which meant that they had to be careful about this and prepare for possible ensuing ambushes to occur as well. One last maiden was hefty, tragic loss, but if it were to happen to all of them, there it was again. He was thinking more about the scope of what could be happening instead of focusing on the victim. This little girl, this young woman, her future taken away from her for the substitute of a life or of solitude and duty, and now even that was stripped away from her for. Osmond was at the loss for words. He merely let the tone of the vitals check system fill the silence and stood by waiting until the sounds of long heels clicked against the floor started to echo through the massive underground. "Hello, Glinda," he said without even turning around to address his closest confidant. "Hello, Professor," the blonde teacher responded with a reserved tone, finding the headmaster down in the school's basement with their guest. She looked back to gaze around at the unbearably long and large corridor that was required to pass through to reach this point in the hall, and entirely shook her head. It's maddening to think the constructors and engineers were in their right mind when they decided to build a space this big under the school. Yes, well, if someone ever made it this far down and was trying to claim a treasure or artifacts being kept hidden here, they want to make sure the perpetrators at least weren't comfortable in their victory. A wry smirk came over the headmaster's face at the thought. A final defiance to whatever or whomever breached our defenses, I suppose. Yes, well, it certainly leaves a lot to be desired, I suppose, Glinda stated as she looked at her headmaster's back. Have you heard some of the ridiculous rumors students have imagined for what goes on under the school? An amused chuckle escaped the headmaster's lips, and he nodded. "Oh yes, there are quite a few in circulation at the moment. Most recently, the theory that we employ golems to sort through our luggages and papers, as well as the idea that there is a giant dumpster beneath our school where we feed all sorts of wildlife or leftovers." He gave a small laugh and shook his head, enjoyed at the silly ideas. "My, the minds of our youth really do create the wildest scenarios, don't you think?" Glinda didn't respond and looked at the headmaster's back before inquiring, "Osmond, why did you come down here?" Osmond tapped a finger against his cane before lifting it up and holding it behind his back. He continued to look at the girl in front of him. "I didn't have any work to do at the moment, and I just thought that she would appreciate the company," he truthfully answered as he looked around at the massive space around them. "Awake or not, I doubt anyone can enjoy being in a place like this alone." Glinda could understand. She couldn't entirely agree with that choice of action at this time, but she understood why he was doing it. It was similar to the reason close friends and families visited the bedside of someone in a coma. They did it because they were hopeful, because they thought they could still hear them, because they wouldn't leave the side of someone they loved. But Osmond was doing this out of guilt and regret, and that's why Glinda could understand why he did it, because she felt just as guilty and to blame for the condition of the Scarface girl in the tube in front of her. Her eyes lingered on the tube and then lowered to the floor before she closed her eyes and then firmly focused on her boss. "Osmond, sooner or later we will need to address the problem at hand. We need to decide on a possible successor for Autumn." Osmond sighed and reached into his jacket to pull out his scroll. The device slid open to its full length, and he started to swipe over the screen for videos of recent fights, matches, and spars they had recorded of their students. This was now another part of the job they never believed they were going to have to engage in, one that was extremely difficult and left a bad taste in the mouth. Picking an acceptable successor to take on this responsibility, except if their theories were right, it couldn't even be considered that anymore. This job was usually passed on to someone worthy of the power, or who they found could be best taught to fight for the maiden's purpose. It can be considered a magnificent honor and a terrible duty at the same time, but now they had to find someone they believed fit those criteria perfectly, and also the chance that they wouldn't be the same person after it was done. At best, they were tasking someone with the incredible burden of sacrificing their hopes and future to protect Remnant in secret. At worst, they would be asking their choice to forfeit everything. It wasn't an easy decision to make, and it wasn't made any easier by the fact that they were making a choice from the roster of students he was supposed to be guiding and making stronger for the future. But it was their job, and Osmond knew that it needed to be done. Glinda's heels clicked against the floor until she came to a stop at his side, as she also started to stream fights on her scroll as well. They both continued to watch matches and study their students' folders and records for candidates. The blonde woman's glasses were illuminated by the secret lights, as she pointed out. We're not sure when we'll need to actually make the decision, but I'm certain the others won't want to put it off there for very long. Osmond hummed in agreement. Knowing the others, they've probably already started making a list of their most suitable candidates. The hunter's teacher let her eyes roll behind her spectacles, and she shifted the pair up her nose and spoke with irritation. Knowing the general, he's probably already finished his list, as well as a complete set of dossiers on each of his choices and why they are the best choice for the job. Yes, well, James can be quite excitable and focused when a task is put in front of him. Osmond stopped swiping across the screen before he watched the video with interest. Speaking of excitable, Miss Adele continues to prove she's the take charge kind of woman I expected her to be. Linda looked up from her screen and leaned over to take a peek at Osmond's scroll. She was greeted with a video of the strong-willed and brazen leader of Team Coffee, Coco Adele. The brunette was wielding her powerful, if less than tactful, Gatling gun and causing her opponent to immediately drop their weapon and surrender. Another video came up of her decimating a horde of Grimm during her run in the initiation test and first getting their attention as a destructive force for the new year. Now she was a second year and showing a lot of promise for the future. Linda gave an ambiguous hum. Miss Adele certainly has the drive to fight and take on a challenge. However, despite her composure, I still believe she has some growing up to do and maturity to develop. I suppose you are right, but you have to admit that Miss Adele's compassion and care for her teammates is quite endearing. Speaking of which, Osmond's screen changed again, and they were now watching the scene of a rabbit fauna swiftly moving through the stage and leaving a flurry of cakes on her foes before retreating to a safe distance to consider her next attack. Miss Scarlatina has been doing some improving of her own during her time here. Her skills will continue to hone with the missions Coffee will be sent on soon enough, and she is showing quite a bit of promise to strive for a future doctorate when she graduates. Bartholomew speaks quite highly of her. I suppose. Glinda agreed with the meek rabbit girl's growth since she arrived at their school. Her time opening up to her team and growing close with her companions had certainly had an obvious effect on her. Even though she was still quite shy meeting new people, it was a stark difference to when she first arrived, where most any contact left her almost comatose. But even though she had grown quite a bit, there was still hesitation and awkwardness in how she interacted with certain kinds of people that were not comfortable with fondness. However, no need to say it. Osmond interrupted before she could actually voice her argument. Velvet is already plagued by bouts of prejudice as it is. If we were to give her this responsibility, she would be forced to meet people that would make those stares and uncomfortable looks seem warm in comparison. She's a kind person, but she still needs to grow more accustomed with the horrors she may face out in the world. Her time may come, but it isn't right now. Glinda gave a small hum of agreement with the headmaster's statement. She looked back at her own scroll and brought up another batch of students to review. She didn't feel right putting their freshmen on the same list after only a few months of attending the school, but they were showing potential. I suppose we can look over some of our newest students as possible candidates. Osmond nodded. Why, yes. There are quite a lot of talented newcomers to Beacon this year. A wry smile came over his face as she jokingly mentioned, some a little more outgoing than others. Glinda's arms fell to her side with exasperation as she shook her head. The experienced huntress argued, "No, I'm sorry, Osmond, but I cannot condone their actions as outgoing. They may be talented and strong, but they all need to learn a little something about responsibility and not merely acting on a whim. They all could have been killed, and you won't even let me give them detention." Yes, well, they did expose all of Veltonwood's criminal activities and discover where he stored all the contraband he stole. The police and our own systems have been trying to uncover his underground persona for well over a decade. Osmond defended the young student's actions by reminding her of the victory that had a deep ripple across the entire world's underground. All of that, and they haven't even completed their first semester here. That seems like quite the outgoing group of youngsters, in my opinion. I still can't believe you won't let me address the problem with them directly. It's all well and good that they did that, but not only was it illegal and stupid, but they were very close to getting killed. The blonde said in a huff before leveling an accusing glare at the man. What's to stop them from doing something that foolish again? Well, hopefully common sense and the lack of any serious threat they believe they would need to act against. Although, let's be honest, Glinda. He gave her a coy smile. If a problem like that presented itself and our students thought they could make a difference, I doubt we would be able to do anything to stop them. Glinda rolled her eyes in aggravation at the headmaster's flexible attitude towards his students' misbehaving. I'm glad that at least one of us isn't so lenient with our students. Good cop and bad cop, Osmond retorted. One is a plate of cookies and the other a riding crop. Glinda gave a disgruntled grumble before pulling up a fight. She watched as the white-clad girl summoned a myriad of different colored glyphs with different effects. In an instant, the fencer disappeared in several bursts of speed and overwhelmed her opponent's senses with her movement. Her strikes didn't leave a lot of damage, considering the bar at the bottom of the screen hadn't shrunken much after the attacks, but Weiss improved her strategy by binding her opponent and attacking him harder. Miss Snee has cemented herself at the top of the sparring class by defeating her enemies before they can properly adapt to her abilities. However, as I'm sure you are aware, she still has a bit too much overconfidence in herself at the moment, and I'm sure power like this won't help that mindset. Indeed, Miss Belladonna, on the other hand, is much more conscious and self-critical of her actions. She thinks her next move ahead of time and lets her instincts and reflexes take over only in a split-second decision. The older man closed his eyes and sighed before shaking his head with much chagrin. But her reluctance to reveal her true nature even to her team conveys a degree of separation she wishes to maintain between her past and present lifestyle. Keeping secrets and detaching from others actually seems like a prerequisite for this task, but I see what you mean. I believe we can keep her as a possibility. Linda wrote something off on her scroll before a different match came up. Of course, her partner, Miss Shalong, is a stark difference in that mindset. Glinda gave an annoyed sigh and slumped her shoulders, although I'm sure we'd be met with quite a bit of disagreement if we made her our choice. Quite, Osmond agreed without hesitation. I'm more than certain that despite our long friendship and respect for each other, Crow wouldn't hesitate to sock me in the mouth if I suggested his niece should take up the mantle of the maiden. Ruby as well. Glinda felt a strange sense of relief knowing that Osmond wasn't going to suggest they put Ruby in this position either. It was a hard job already, but the idea of giving it to the sweet, naive, hooded girl left a knot in her stomach. Nor Valkyrie, desperate need of self-control. Agreed. Osmond brought up a different fight and felt his attention quickly get absorbed by the fight on screen. He watched intently before noting, I didn't think Tenten had a weapon of her own when she came to Beacon. Was I wrong? Glinda looked up from her device and spared a look towards his scroll instead. She watched the video of the match between Tenten and Pyrrha play out from different angles as the brunette unveiled her twin stick style for the first time. She answered his inquiry. You weren't wrong, but over the week Miss Tamura had been traveling into the city and constructing a weapon of her own. I believe she told me they were called Bulge and Khaled. And she seemed to improve enough that she could even match Miss Nikos in a fight. She fast-forwarded through the match to the end before shrugging, or at least for an impressive amount of time considering she's using these weapons for the first time. I thought so too. Despite her loss, she was still quite ecstatic with the prospect of her new inventions working properly, and her team greeted her with quite a warm welcome when she returned to her seat. The blonde woman looked aside and groaned. You have no idea how difficult it was to make those children quiet down so that the other matches could go on as scheduled. Osmond ignored his assistant's plight as he reversed the video and kept his eyes on the combatants. His attention was firmly on the movements and mannerisms of one person in particular. You think so too? He looked at Glinda as the shorter woman fixed her glasses and looked at the screen in deep thought. She fiddled with her own scroll as the profile of the invincible girl popped up on the touchpad. I believe out of all the people we have to choose from, Pure Nikos might very well exemplify everything we are looking for in a maiden candidate. She was right, kind, compassionate, intuitive, bright, strong, willing, and also concerned for others in trying to help to the best of her ability. It was exactly the kind of traits that convinced the old wizard to pass his magic onto the sisters in the first place. Osmond closed his eyes and let a long exhale out of his nose before closing his scroll entirely. Goodwitch looked at him questioningly as he pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He put his glasses back on before looking at the blonde. I think we have spent more than enough time on the subject by ourselves. Why don't we focus on something else at the moment? I'm sure there are other immediate matters we need to take care of. I'm glad you brought that up, Glinda noted as she brought up a document on her scroll before passing it over to the headmaster. Because these are a lot of policies, renovations, and other matters we need to attend to in order to prepare for the arriving students for the festival. Osmond stared down at the screen in silence before giving a heavy sigh. He leveled a stern and dry glare towards Glinda. Glinda, when I said immediate matters, I was referring more to dinner and taking a break. This was our break, sir, and now back to work, the blonde woman retorted before giving a sly shrug. However, I do agree that we could probably pick something up from the cafeteria before we get further into the paperwork. Then I suppose we should start heading towards the cafeteria. The two teachers came to an agreement and Glinda started off back down the hall. Osmond lingered in place and looked back up at the comatose girl. He spoke clearly and softly. Until we meet again, Amber. Hunting. The renovations for the visiting students are going underway at the moment and should finish by the time the school arrives, Glinda stated as she walked beside Osmond. Fortunately, the dorm rooms haven't experienced any damage or tear since the last time they were used. All we need is the cleaning crew to clear the dust and clean some rooms. Only some of them? Osmond questioned. Glinda spoke with displeasure in her voice. Apparently, the prospect of a mostly empty dorms is so enticing that some students still risk the chance of punishment to sneak in there. We'll have to make sure they check the rooms for contraband, trash, and stains. Well, they are at that age. And breaking the code of conduct we explicitly laid down concerning those rooms, Glinda retorted before calming down and moving to the next issue. Now, we'll also have to choose commentators and announcers for the tournament. Any suggestions? Glinda pulled up a list that went over several pages filled with names, contact info, and rate for hire. I've made a list of some professional announcers that I believe would do a good job commentating and telling the play-by-play of the fights. Their prices and rates per hour are on the side. We'll need to interview each of the applicants and determine who we think would do the best job. I see. Osmond looked the list over and seemed disillusioned to the idea of spending time choosing between these people. He looked up from his scroll and spotted his solution coming towards them. Peter Bartholomew, how are you two doing together? Enjoying the weekend, I hope? And the two male teachers stopped in front of the duo as the portly mustached man enthusiastically answered, Osmond, Glinda, I hope you two are in good spirits as well. Barty and I just came back from the cafeteria after getting some good nutrition in our bellies. An excellent coffee as well, Oobleck noted with a raise of his mug before quickly downing half the beverage and nodding. They used a very good brew today. Osmond nodded back. I'll definitely check up on that when we arrive. And what were you two doing? Glinda held her scroll under her arms, going over the preparations for the Vita Festival. Oh, the two teachers looked between each other before grimacing and shaking their heads. A terrible crucible going through that again. I remember the last festival and tournament we held here. The paperwork never ceased. Yes, well, it is a task, but it's one we must finish, Glinda stated as she took note of the exhausted look on the men's faces, just thinking about the paperwork. Why were they dreading the documents and files? They barely even had any work to do compared to her and Osmond. Oh well, she just chalked it up to them being lazy. We were just about to go over the list of announcers. Speaking of which, Osmond interrupted. Peter, how would you like to be a commentator for the tournament? Glinda's eyes went wide and wide as plates as the shorter huntsman rubbed his chin and thought, me giving commentary during the tournament fights? He rubbed his mustache in deep thought. I've never done something like that before, but many of my students tell me I have quite the way with words. I'll do it. It would be an honor to report the pulse-pounding, adrenaline-filled fights to the population around Remnant. His enthusiasm disappeared for a moment before he asked, will I be paid for this? I'm sure we can work something out. Then I'll do it, he announced across the hall before quickly making his way back to his office. I need to start vocal training and tongue twisters to prepare myself. They watched the short teacher dash down the hall and disappear in an instant before it was just the three of them. Osmond looked at the green-haired man. Barty, would you like to be a commentator as well? I'm sure your years of experience, deep perception, and wealth of knowledge would be greatly beneficial in giving the audience context and insight into how the students fight. You want me to make sure Peter doesn't go off on a tangent and tell the whole world one of his stories, don't you? Like I said, deep perception. Will I get overtime? Like I said, we can work something out. Then I suppose I am honored and will accept the job. The twitchy history teacher quickly finished the last bit of his coffee and nodded to the two professors. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some midterms to prepare. He sped down the hall in a flash and left the headmaster and teacher by themselves. Osmond had a small smile in triumph before swiping his finger. I suppose we can cross the announcers off the list. Glinda answered his triumphant attitude with the iciest, darkest glare he had seen her make in a long time. Her eyebrows twitched several times before giving a very heavy growl and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She aimed a point glare towards him and shook her head. That was a dirty move. Yes, but we have our announcers now, and for such a low price than any of those other announcers. He smiled and continued towards the cafeteria. I consider that a win. The headmaster walked through the doors and looked around the cafeteria to see a scarce amount of students actually eating in the halls. This was usually the kind of turnout on Saturday because some people like to travel out to the city and eat there. A few students noticed their arrival and sent him quick greetings as he and Glinda made their way to the food. He picked up an apple and a mug of hot coffee before waiting to see what Glinda decided to do next. They're not scars or tattoos. No birthmarks. Oh wow, I always thought you just got scratched on your face that never healed. I thought you were just a weirdo that colored his face in with crayon. You think I would do that every day before going out? I said you were a weirdo. Osmond looked over and spotted the group of a dozen students that were always causing the most ruckus and energy in a crowd. Naruto was apparently the one leading the conversation this time as he shrugged. Well, I can be a weirdo and still have birthmarks. That's pretty cool, Yang complimented with a smile. As far as birthmarks go, that's a pretty lucky one to have. Better than having a big splotch of skin that looks like some dude's face on your cheeks. Instead, you were born looking like a cat. A cat. Naruto touched his cheek up apprehensively before shrugging. Meh, people always say I look like something, usually a cat or lion or fox or whatever. He turned to Blake and pointed to his cheeks with a coy smile. Hey Blake, you're insightful. You think I look like a cat? The black-clad girl just gave him a cold glare before focusing back on her meal. When did those two start conversing enough that Naruto could put her on the spot so quickly? Why skeptically shook her head. I still can't believe those are just birthmarks. They are. I'm serious. I was born with them. Naruto leaned over the table and looked between all his friends desperately. Touch them. Go ahead. Feel for yourselves that they're real. Needless to say, no one was jumping at the chance to touch Naruto's face so quickly. I'll do it. Nor finally caved as her curiosity got the better of her. The other sent her a confused look as she leaned over and touched one of Naruto's whiskers. Her eyes widened in surprise before running a finger over the length of it and smiling. Hey, it's really funny. It tickles. Really? Ruby asked before arguing with herself before diving in and feeling one of the other whiskers. She felt the rough little patches of skin against her fingers and giggled. It's like a kitty tongue. It is. Wait, let me feel. I want to try. What are you guys talking about? Let me feel. Weiss looked at the scene of her companions reaching over to feel the strange markings themselves and completely forgot the fact they were basically petting someone's face. She shivered a little in disgust before shaking her head. How? How did I get myself stuck with such weird people? Just how? Y'all seem to be as lively as ever. Everyone immediately fell into their seats and sat ramrod straight at the familiar authoritative voice appearing out of nowhere. They all looked towards Osmond to see him standing with a mug of coffee and a blithe smile on his face at the scene. Ruby was the first to recover and happily greeted the older man. Hi, Professor. What are you doing here? I came to pick up something to eat before getting back to work. Glinda and I are starting the arduous little process of planning everything for the festival. Osmond's eyes seemed to lose their luster as he looked down at his coffee sadly. I should have gotten a whole pot. Oh, Weiss looked up at the headmaster with sparkles in her eyes as she was triggered by the prospect of scheduling and so much skilled planning ahead of him. She asked with excitement in her voice, Professor, is there anything you would need help in? Any event planning or filling or assisting you would need to help make this festival perfect? She proudly placed a hand on her chest and offered in a regal tone, My team and I would happily do whatever we can to assure the other schools can see just how wonderful Beacon truly is. If her offer really was for the whole team to help, it was a surprise to Ruby as they each sent the Harris's dirty looks of betrayal at her offer. Nothing at the moment, but I'll definitely remember that offer if anything comes up in the future. Mishni, he looked around at the groups of students. What about all of you? Not feeling like going out to the city on a Saturday evening? Kiba gave a dry laugh. I'm pretty sure we've had enough fun on Saturday for a lifetime. I bet. Osmond agreed before his eyes fell on the Noctic stick user, and he gave her a quick nod. Tintin, Glinda informed me about those new weapons you made for yourself. I want to congratulate you on a job well done. Both you and Miss Nico's performed splendidly. Tintin blinked in surprise at the fact that Osmond was addressing her before she timidly sat up straighter and flushed slightly. Oh, thank you, Professor. You're quite welcome. He felt someone stop at his side and saw the blonde teacher had finished picking up her meal. Are you ready? Yes, the blonde-haired huntress looked back to the students and gave them a quick nod. Good evening, children. Good evening, Miss Goodwitch. Most of them responded before Yang gave a cheeky grin. And so we hear you guys got a lot of work ahead of you to prepare for the festival. That's gotta suck, huh? It only seems like a lot, but it's not anything we haven't handled before. Glinda defended as Osmond would have happily disagreed with that statement, but the blonde teacher fixed her glasses and looked between all of them critically. Unfortunately, even if we finish all this paperwork, my week will still be preoccupied with grading all of your midterm papers. I hope you'll have them all finished by the start of class on Monday, so I won't have to deal with any late entries. It was impossible not to notice several construction of eyes and whitening of skin as several students realized that their essay was due in less than 2 days. Glinda's eyes narrowed in annoyance before Osmond gently placed a hand on her shoulder and started leading her away. Well, I think it's about time we get back to work. Good luck, everyone. Oh, Weiss, the paper. I forgot about the paper. I haven't finished it yet. Don't look at me. I told you we should address it when we got the assignment, but you were getting attacked by a pillow, remember? Hey, Blake, you haven't finished your paper either, right? Not yet. Oh, thank God. I still have a sentence to finish before I'm done with the whole thing. Whatever will I do? Don't toy with me, woman! Sasuke, you finished your paper. Let me copy off of it. And copy my... You remember these papers have different topics, right? Oh, God, they do. Nora, did you remember your works cited? Works cited? No! The doors closed behind them as Osmond and Glinda made their way back to his office. Glinda was still fuming and Osmond jokingly stated, Well, they seem as lively as ever. Lively, Glinda said back with a bite in her voice. They seemed as irresponsible as ever. All my reminders and warnings at the end of the class, and they still forgot the assignment I gave them. This always happens during the midterms. And our students still pull through and give you surprisingly good papers. Relax, Glinda. Panic and cramming, it's just a part of being a student for them. The blonde huntress gave a long inhale and exhale through her nose as her shoulders shuddered with barely contained rage. He noticed her calm down a little before he asked, Do you still have reservations about our new students? Because I think they're doing quite well so far. Glinda looked at him perplexed before she finally realized what he was referring to. He was talking about that conversation they had on the cliffs during the initiation test. She composed herself before speaking. Ruby has certainly improved over her time here and has definitely defined expectations in regards to her leadership. I'm still not sure how to feel about bringing someone here 2 years earlier than expected, but I'll certainly say that Ruby is just as skilled and worthy to be here as anyone else. Osmond nodded in agreement. John Ark? Her eyes focused for a moment before shaking her head. I'm still not sure how to feel about that young man. His grades seem to be stagnant and the progress he has made in combat is minimal at best. The only thing I can say as a positive is that he certainly brings the best out of his teammates and has scarce moments of tactical thinking, but I believe neither will be able to help him when he is by himself, and if his team will need to carry his weight during the tournament. Mr. Ark is certainly faring less favorable than the other students his age, but it might just be he hasn't had the chance to fully dedicate himself into this life just yet. Really? Glinda spat sarcastically. He went through the initiation and joined the other students on their secret little crusade. Would he do tasks like that if he wasn't dedicated to this life, like you said? They walked into the elevator in the central tower, as Osmond responded. We each face a crossroad somewhere along our lives where we need to choose which path we take. We can either throw ourselves fully into what we have chosen to do, or abandon it completely to pursue a different path. Perhaps Mr. Ark just hasn't had that choice placed before him yet. We can only wait and see what's in store for him in the future. The door closed behind them, and Osmond looked towards the hunters expectantly. And how about the criminals you were so worried about? I will admit that I may have been a bit too hasty in judging them. Glinda admitted. Naruto has shown a lot of promising growth as a leader, although I don't appreciate his stubbornness and refusal to utilize his semblance in battle. She crossed her arms indignantly and settled back in her spot. The other day he was fighting that Winchester boy in a spar. Despite winning the match, he let down his guard and suffered a serious head injury in the process. Thank goodness his aura healed the wound in that particular way, it does, but that still left him wary. And once when I inquired why he doesn't use his semblance, he danced around he danced around the answer and refused to tell me why. Her eyes narrowed in irritation. I swear that boy needs the crash course in discipline and respect. Ospen was entertained at the idea of the persistent Glinda trying to conduct the bulkhead student to listen. It would definitely be an interesting spectacle to see. Which one would crack first? Naruto was definitely stubborn like a mule, but his bet was Glinda would find a way. She was scary like that. And I suppose I was wrong about Mr. Uchiha standing at this school as well. I was expecting the worst from him, considering the history behind his name and the rumors passing around Remnant, but I suppose we were wrong. The hunters acknowledged the young swordsman showing so far. He seems very well adjusted for someone that came in from such a undesirable position. You think so? Glinda eyed the headmaster strangely as he swirled the coffee in his mug. You think otherwise? Osmond looked down at his beverage and stayed silent for a moment before speaking. I see a skilled and exceptional young man following others and hiding behind the mask he made of others. The two teachers remained in silence before the elevator arrived at his door and opened up for them. Osmond gave a stoic shrug before walking out. Or perhaps I am reading part 2 into it than necessary. Come then, Glinda, let's get to work. The headmaster sat behind his desk, and the atmosphere changed as Glinda placed her salad down and started reading off the list of jobs. Now we need to start deciding the location for the fairgrounds and which vendors to allow on campus, as well as making plans for additional transport systems to and from Amity Coliseum. We'll also need to check with the broadcasting crew and CCT crews to assure that the stream can be kept at real time without any faults. She looked up from her scroll and made off for the elevator again. I left the contact and sponsor folders on my desk. I'll be right back. Osmond smiled and raised his mug. I'll be waiting for your return. She sent him a stern glare before stepping into the elevator and letting the doors close on her words. Instead of sitting around doing nothing, how about you use your time to decide on an officator? Osmond's sense of relief immediately disappeared when the hunter's words hit him. Crap, he still needed to decide an office sitter. The school and kingdoms held the festival biannually and welcomed people from all over Remnant to partake in the celebration. But when it came to the tournament, there was a small hiccup with deciding who participated and who didn't. Considering there were hundreds of teams that applied to join and only so many spots, there had to be trials and tests to see who would actually be a part of the fights. And considering that one of the 4 schools was always hosting the tournament, and there was worry of bias or nepotism playing a factor in teams from certain kingdoms being accepted or denied unfairly. So a huntsman and huntress was chosen by the host to officiate the whole trials and to decide who got to fight in the tournament. They had to be fair and impartial with their decisions. Most hunters didn't have an alliance to just one kingdom, so there were a lot to choose from, but the hard part was convincing them to stay in Vale for a few months until the festival came to an end, which meant he either had to give someone a favor or cash in on one he had earned. Oh, actually, he might be a good choice. He loves the celebration, and he was always very serious when it came to matters that needed his attention. Osmond jacked his scroll into its port and typed in the contact. He waited and heard the ring echoed from the screen. The pictures didn't come up, but a voice did answer. Hello? Hello again, it's Osmond, headmaster. Well, this is a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting another call from you. Huh, you know you can just call me Osmond, correct? We know each other well enough that the title just seems awkward. Sorry, I'm more used to addressing people with titles in my line of work. Force of habit, it's fine, I understand. So what I owe the sudden call, oh no, did something happen? No, nothing happened. Everything is fine. I'm calling for a different reason. Oh, okay, sorry. It's just the last time you called me, the people in my office were worried because I broke down crying immediately after hanging up. I know it seems kinda anecdotal, but there's an expectation of either dread or joy when I pick up your call. Well, if anything, I believe this would be in the joy category. You're where we're holding the festival and tournament here in Vel, correct? Of course, my business is prepared for any jobs we might be given during the preparation. Wait, is this what you're calling? Do you need us for protection or something? No, that's not it. Your group is exceptionally talented, and I would come to you immediately if that were the case. But at the moment, we are handling all those matters ourselves. No, I called because I wish to talk with you about something. Just me? Yes. During the tournament, we require an outside party to officiate the teams and make a test to decide who participates in the fights. And we need the officiator to stay in the kingdom at least until the tournament participates are decided on, which means a few months at most. And I was wondering if you would take the job. I know that this probably comes as a bit of surprise. I understand if there may be complications with your schedule. If you can't do it, then that's fine. No, it's not that. It's just that was really surprising, but it sounds like a great opportunity. I'll probably have to work something out with the others, but it sounds like an honor. Is there a time limit or any information I need? The latest we would need an answer is by the end of the school semester, but if you would like information and a general idea of what you'd be doing, you can come over to Beacon and we can have a chat discussing the parameters. How long would that take? A day, 2 at most. That sounds fine. When should I come over? In a week, maybe 2. I can contact you when I've worked everything out with Linda. We can have a nice chat when all of our paperwork is finished. And if you like, you can even visit the campus, see the dorms, check on our new batch of students. Whatever you think would be a good use of your time. I will. Thank you, Ospen. The call came to an end and the headmaster leaned back in his chair satisfied. He had another job almost completed and was helping solve a problem he had been trying to rectify since the semester began. This was promising to be quite an eventful fight festival. Extra, like a starfish. No! Ah! And Kiba yelped as he pulled back his hand before the knife could slap it away. His aura would have protected him from any serious damage, but it still would have stung for a few seconds. He barked at the ginger girl. Damn it, Nora! Watch where you wave that thing! I warned you. Nora pointed the knife at the Tonfa user and narrowed her eyes threateningly. I said that if anyone tries to take my chicken tenders, I'd smack them away. No exceptions. She happily started digging into her giant plate of gold fried chicken and enjoyed every bite before speaking again. You should have taken Ruby as a caution. Ruby was rubbing her throbbing red hand with little tears in her eyes. They just look so good. I warned you. Naruto walked over to the table and took up a seat quietly. Hey guys, what's up? Why is Kiba glaring and Ruby crying? Blake answered with a dull tone. We're watching a perfect example of people never learning from their mistakes. Whatever that means. He spotted the plate of food and reached over. Ooh, yummy. Mine! Swish and plop. The entire cafeteria immediately went silent and everyone at the table looked on like they were frozen at the moment. Naruto's hand laid on the table and his arm now ended in a stump. Everyone just looked between the hand and its former owner in silence, waiting for any kind of reaction he gave. The stump started to turn and glow before another hand steadily grew out of the spot it was cut. After a moment, a new hand was there that Naruto slowly opened and closed to assure that it worked. He blinked in surprise. Huh. Ruby John, you guys were right about the whole severed limb theory. They didn't get to answer as the hand started to twitch before a similar experience started to occur out of the sliced area as well. Moments later, a second Naruto with a different color palette appeared lying on the table. Before immediately sitting up, he looked around in silence at all the people that stared at him. He blinked a few times and remained still before snatching up a tender and the knife out of Nora's hands. Hey! Mwahaha! He darted out of the cafeteria and left the students sitting there in silence. Schwack! Ah! My other arm! Oh god, why? Wahaha! Would Naruto Uzumaki please come to the headmaster's office for the matter of stabbing a student in the arm with a knife? Naruto Uzumaki to the headmaster's office. God damn it. End of chapter 29.